Hello and welcome back. So we did a video on the Leica M6 and giving it an overview of all the basic functions, and wanted to do the same here for the Hasselblad 500. This is a black model. It's painted black, so it's definitely had some little wear and tear over the years, with an older lens on it. That's why it's silver. Some lenses are black, or different designs, but they all operate more or less the same way. And same thing for every Hasselblad camera. Regardless of what model you have, if it's a 501, 502, the functions are more or less the same. So if you're in the market for one of these, hopefully this video will help you kind of understand kind of the basics of it before you get it in your hands, or maybe you've just gotten it in your hands and you want to make sure you're not going to break anything first. So just like last time, we're going to start by taking off the lens. If we spin the camera around, we can see there is this button here on the bottom right if you're facing the camera. Pushing that, giving the lens a quick turn. Oh, the shutter is partially cocked, so it's not going to let me take the lens off like that. It's a good place to start, is that the shutter does have to be fully cocked to take the lens off. You can see it there. And the reason is this little gear right here. If we fire the shutter, no, it's not going to let me fire the shutter because there's no lens. But this is spun 90 degrees. When the shutter is fired, this is going to be facing top down, so it's going to be vertical, and that's going to lock the lens in place. But it's fairly compact, fairly light. Once you do take the lens off, most of the heft is in there. So let's set the body aside. Look at the lens really quick itself. You can see, starting on the back, there's that same gear that just drives into the body. Once this is spun, that's what's going to cock the shutter. All Hasselblad lenses have the shutter built into the lens, and I say all, but that's not exactly true. Most Hasselblad lenses you'll find have the shutter built into the lens. It's the opposite of a lot of cameras like the Pentax 67 series. This is a 50mm f4 Distagon. It is not coated, but it's still made by Carl Zeiss. As you can see on the front there, it's pretty hefty. When we look at the lens, you have a few basic things. Here's the focusing dial. And then you have the shutter speed and f-stop linked together. So you'll see that if I want to adjust something, if I'm changing the f-stop, the shutter speed dial is moving with it. And you have these red bars that are going to show your hyperfocal distance. So as we move it there, you can see as we open up the lens, the hyperfocal distance decreases, and we're not going to be able to get as much in focus in a single shot. To uncouple these, there is this bar over here on the kind of bottom side of the lens, or bottom right if you're thinking about it when it's mounted. Just by pushing down on that, you can then spin the shutter speed dial independently, and now you have a new exposure value set. A lot of these lenses do have a bull mode and a flash mode built into them as well. You can see that over here you have a PC sync socket, and it's on the lens. But because this is a leaf shutter, it's going to work at any of the shutter speeds that are represented on here. So even 1/500th of a second, you'll still be able to use external flash. You also have an X and M sync, which, few people are going to be using bulbs these days, but it does exist in case you want it to. Spinning around, there's not a whole lot going on the bottom. You have a few other little tabs that, I'll be honest, I don't know what this does. It's not something I've ever actually used. But there we go. No matter what lens you have, so whether it's an 80mm, whether it's a wide angle, whether it's a telephoto, all Hasselblad lenses use this same kind of system. Some of the more modern ones do decouple these, so they're not as locked together when you're using them, and that can be a pro or a con when you're in the market to buy. The later lenses are obviously quite a bit more expensive than this, which I only paid like $100 for. Going back to the body itself, the body is relatively simple when we talk about it from a mechanical point of view. All that's really housed in here is the mirror itself. And we can see that if we take off the back. Let's see. To take off the back, you're going to use this tab on the top here. The dark slide does need to be inserted into the camera, otherwise it's not going to come off. That's a safety measure to prevent you from accidentally exposing your film. So you can see it pops off right there. If I lock it back in, pull this out, and then try and take it off, it's not going to let me. It's going to be stuck on there. So we'll go ahead and pull this guy off really quick. Body gets even smaller than this, believe it or not. The film advance is interchangeable. You pull it up, you can push on this button right here, twist it a little bit, and it pops off. There are different film advances available. Some have like built-in light meters and things like that. This one's a little bit more modern version. I like it a little bit better. It's got a nice gear or kind of grip on it so that you can use it even if the lever is pulled out. Down here you might notice this little window. The back of the film, or the film cartridge itself has the same one. If these are both white, that means the frame is unexposed, the camera's cocked. If they're both red, that means the photo's been exposed. If they're out of sync, the camera's not going to work. It's not going to line up, and you can tell that because there are these gears built into the back of both the film back, and then there's an arm that works with the camera body. So as you spin this, it's going to turn gears in here, which will in turn turn gears on the film back to advance the film. You also have this little nub right here, which you might notice. And when you depress the shutter, that nub is going to fire out, and it's going to hit this little piece right here. And that's what changes this and tells the film back that, hey, the film's exposed, it's time to advance it. Up top, Viewfinder pulls open just like that. You can see in there. Comes out just by sliding it out. Looking at the Viewfinder itself, again, this one's a little bit more modern. They've changed the design a few times over the years. But all of the Hasselblad top-down viewfinders will have a magnifier that pops out. To get that, there's just this little tab right here on the inside. Give it a quick push, and it pops up. Looking at the Viewfinder, this is an AccuMatte screen, so it's going to be a little bit brighter than a standard one. But if you want to swap them out, it's incredibly easy. Just push down on either of these tabs right here, and it'll fall right out. Just be careful you don't accidentally drop it. You do have two additional curtains back here. Because the lens is open all the time, it's going to be throwing light into the mirror, and you just want to make sure that no light's bouncing around and escaping, getting onto your film. So there are these auxiliary curtains in the back. When you fire the shutter, those open, allowing the film to be exposed. If we go back to the film back itself, they're all pretty much the same, despite there being different versions of them. This is an A12 back, so it's a 12 exposure, standard medium format, 120 film. They made A16 backs that took 6x4.5 exposures instead of 6x6 like this one. They all made A16 backs that also did a square 4.5x4.5. You could get 70mm backs. There are a whole bunch of different versions that they made, but they all work essentially the same. On the back, you have this little tab where you can put, your film. You can also set a reminder. So this is set to 100 ISO, so you just know what's left inside there. Similarly to the back, let's see, we'll pull this out really quick. So if we look at it, you can see this is the pressure plate for the film itself. We can actually pull this tab, you rotate it a bit, and this is going to pop out where the film cartridge goes. Like most 120 cameras, just uses a take-up spool. You swap them around, push this into the right spot, and then you can reload it. The film is going to come around the back and loop over so that the film is pointing this way. This red arrow here indicates the starting arrow on the roll of 120 film, so you know exactly where to line it up to get it started, because it is completely mechanically driven on these newer backs. Some of the older backs used a window right here where you would see the backing paper on the film, and you could look and check and see what exposure you were at. We just slide this back in here though, lock it into place, put the dark slide back in. Once you're loaded, you'll notice that pulling the cartridge itself out has reset the counter. To wind the film, you just move this arm and start cranking. And that's gonna move this guy right here until you get to a point where you would be at first exposure. That can then be set back. You can always spin it backwards too if you're not lined up, so that you can get it to lock into place nice and easy. Assembling the camera, straightforward. If we're going to put the Viewfinder back on and collapse it down. To put the film back on, we can check, make sure, hey, we have a white dot there. We have a white dot on the camera itself. So we know that these are going to hook up, and also that the dark slide is installed. Locks in. The shutter's cocked, as we talked about before, so we can give that a quick twist. And then the shutter button, just down here. Oop, the shutter button is not going to fire if the slide is in, worth calling out. So we can just give that a go there. One thing, in addition, if you're on a tripod or if you are hand holding it, you can, despite its weight, you can hand hold these and shoot them pretty slow, down to 1/15 of a second if you really want to, just because it's a leaf shutter, so there's just not a lot of movement. But all you have to do if you want to lock the mirror up for for less vibration is push this tab right there. That's gonna pop up the mirror, which you just heard. It's also gonna open up the shutter curtains. Oh wait, no, I don't think it's gonna open up the shutter curtains in the back, but then that is just gonna fire the shutter. So it decouples the synchronized mirror movement and shutter movement. If you push it, you can hear them both there pretty loud. If you do this again, there's the mirror moving up, there's the shutter firing, there they all fall back into place. Hope this video was pretty helpful, and you may have learned a thing or two if you're looking at buying a Hasselblad 500 series camera. If you have any questions, please be sure to leave a comment below. Like and subscribe, it means a lot. And let me know if you have a camera that you want me to see. I don't have a ton of cameras in my collection these days, but the ones I do have I'm fairly familiar with, and I'm making some of these videos to try and help people out who might be in the market for one. So thanks for watching, and until next time.